Yeah, a little history about me, and I don't know if you guys know or care, but I started in the business at Atari, kind of followed my brother in as a young high schooler, finished high school graduated, of course, and started working at Atari on the assembly lines of their video game products. And did that for about a year and was promoted to Pinball. I was working, I believe the game I started working on was Atarians, which was their first foray into pinball, and a complete disaster. And I was hired as a lead on the assembly line, and I had about 15 people working under me, and we basically built play fields and shipped games out the door. Unknowingly, we were going to have tons of problems with them. I don't know if any of you have owned any of those games, but I would say a good 2/3 of those games shipped came back. The reason they came back was that, well, all the parts kind of fell off the playfield and were laying on the bottom of the cabinet. I can't tell you how many playfields we repaired.
And in those games, in the bottom of the cabinet, you had all the circuit boards.
That's correct. They
good.
were clever enough to put plastic covers over that stuff, but the problem with that, the heat generated in the bottom of the cabinet would cause the plastic to, so what would happen is the screws and everything else that fell out of the plywood ended up, guess where? On the boards. So a complete disaster. So we worked through that. I stayed there probably about a year, and then I moved interdepartmentally out of that into oddly enough, the plant maintenance department. There's a reason for this. It sounds crazy. Atari had a policy where 2 family members could not work in the same department. Well, my brother was already working in pinball engineering, so I couldn't get in there, but I knew I didn't want to be repairing broken playfields, so. Time went on, Superman came out, they kind of got their act together, moved everything up into the back box, got smart, got conventional. It was kind of too late. Atari pulled the plug on pinball. So here I am, I finally get into pinball engineering through the maintenance ladder because Steve had actually left the company and gone to Williams. So there was an opening. So I jumped in there, and I think I was there 6 months, and they shut everything down. So now I get assigned to, this is really weird. If you've listened to my brother's stories, he's talked about where he started at Atari. His first job, I believe, were burn-in ovens at Building F, where they did all the PCB manufacturing. Well, that was my last job. So it's kind of an odd course of events. But anyway, from there, I got a call from Steve asking if I wanted to come out to Chicago to be a tech and, you know, basically learn the rest of what pinball was about. And I said, yeah, I'm not doing anything else. I'm 20 years old, you know. So a couple months goes by. Steve comes out to California with Mike Stroll, who was then the president of Williams. And I met him in a hotel room in Los Gatos, California, oddly enough. And I got hired to come to Williams as a tech that day. He doubled my salary, paid all my moving expenses, and offered me a shot at game design if I looked promising at some point. So that all worked, obviously that worked out at some point. So then came to Williams and teched on a bunch of, all the old System 7 games, even earlier. When I got there, I think the game on the line was Tri-Zone, just to give you some indication of timing, which would have been 1979. So I started teching on, obviously, a lot of Steve's games, Claude Fernandez, Tony Kramer, Barry Ausler. All these guys were like gods to me when I got there, because I, you know, didn't know shit. So I learned from the bottom up every aspect of pinball development, design, all the pieces that I needed to know about prototyping. I made a lot of parts for Speak of the Devil, there he is, Steve's games. I learned the business from the bottom up, and it was fun. I was around fun people. It was, God, it was great. I was 21 at that point. And so we moved to 1982, and Mike Stroll offers me an opportunity to make a pinball. So at that period of time, video games were hot, and everybody was selling Defender, Robotrons, and all the other stuff that was great in the day. And pinball was kind of taking a slide. really bad. It was a bad time. And so I come with this, my first game, which was Thunderball. I don't know if any of you have seen that game or know about it. There it is. Okay, what you're seeing here is, there's the playfield drawing on the left. Well, we actually did 3 sets of art for this game, which didn't really have a clear-cut idea what the theme was going to be about. It sort of evolved over a 1.5-year period, and we decided that no one would know what the heck that was. What's going on that playfield? Does anybody know? Because it's kind of unclear. So we ended up trashing that passive art, and we went to, can you go to the next slide? Okay, that's the back glass that accompanies that last. So we did not only the back glass, but the playfield as well, okay? And then we moved off of this completely. You can go to the next one. And this is what it ended up being, which was a giant, sort of a planet filled with balls, and balls to the wall. Balls everywhere. And we had this other really bad feature in there called reload. And I remember Larry DeMar raving how bad an idea that was. Why does it have to say reload every 5 seconds? Well, the reason for that was it was a time-based game. So the balls were cycled automatically through the game. You never had to pull a plunger. They would come up from under the playfield and from around the back of the playfield, both directions. So it's kind of a cool ball mechanism. I wish I had pictures of it. I do not. So that was really the main innovation in the game, and then we tried to apply video game-like rules to it, because at the time we thought that's what people want to do. Couldn't have been more wrong, couldn't have made a bigger mistake, but it got me in the door. I think it got my foot in the door for the next game, which was Firepower 2. And this was the first conventional game that I laid out with the help of my brother. I actually asked Steve if he'd be okay with this. At that time, Steve, I think you were doing King Video. You were in California.
You're asking me a question? I can't hear you.
No, I'm just telling them where you were at that time.
If I minded if you made Firepower 2.
Yeah.
No.
And so we made this game, changed the rules, obviously. We put a ramp on it and brought up a quick 2-ball multi-ball deal, because Firepower, to me, I love that game. It was my favorite game of all time at that time. And I could never, it was really difficult to get multi-ball. It was just tough. So I wanted to make that a little easier for people. And that's kind of how I think Steve and I differ a lot in our designs. Is I like to cater to the casual player much more than other designers did. And, you know, I think that it kind of rounded out the Williams product line in retrospect, because there were a lot of hardcore games. I mean, Steve's known for, you know, kick-ass rules and tough shots and, you know, fast, and I like that stuff, but I thought, how are other people going to be able to do that, you know, and have a good time? So my kind of philosophy, design philosophy, developed from this game of, I'm going to try to make things a little bit easier, but I'm going to make the rules tough enough that you have to work to get things. So you can go to the next one, please. Okay, this is interesting. Baseball game. How'd that happen? I was asked by management, a bunch of us were, who wants to do a baseball game? We're thinking about bringing a baseball game out. Well, everybody was doing pinballs, and I went, I'll do it. You know, I love those things. I love the old games. So we did Pennant Fever, which was there hadn't been a baseball built by Williams, I think, in probably it was some 15 years before they'd gone and done this. You know, that was the last time they did it, sorry. So we developed some new rules, put a ramp on it, did the consecutive home run thing. So I kind of did that just to kind of keep moving. But after that, I was ready for another pinball, and so we went to, next slide, please, Sorcerer. This I did with a bunch of people. Python was actually very helpful with this game. He contributed the eyes in the back of the game, and Pam Erickson, of course, did the art. And we did the ramp, again, from Firepower, very similar. Actually, I think it was the same part, the ramp itself. But then we added the multi-ball on this one.
Can I ask you a question about that, Mark?
Sure.
I've seen a different version of the back glass. where the score displays are in a different position. What's the story there?
You have.
Is it that or is it Grand Lizard? I'm thinking.
You're thinking of Grand Lizard.
Right, sorry.
No problem. Yeah, this was pretty much in and out. This was one shot. This game went very smooth. We didn't have a lot of problems with it. I think I built 2 Whitewoods on this one and we were done with it, which was, it was pretty rare for me. But, you know, again, we were still in the throes of a very difficult time for pinball. Things were still pretty slow. I think Space Shuttle had come out either right before this or right after it.
About the same time, yeah.
And that really brought things back. I mean, that game really brought Williams back to pinball, I think, you know. Okay, we can go to the next one. Okay, here's Road Kings. This game I did with, this is a great story. I did this with a junior programmer by the name of George Petro, who was still in college. I work for him today. He is my boss at Play Mechanics. So that's pretty weird. But he did a great job on the software on this, and this game actually had 2 prior titles before we settled on it. It originally was going to be a Western theme, and the name was High Noon. For whatever reason, I was having a hard time latching onto a good theme with this product. Tough time. We went through, after that, we decided we were going to call it Samurai. That didn't happen. And finally, a young artist that we had there, a guy by the name of Tim Elliott, was a huge Mad Max fan. He said, let's do Mad Max, we'll call it something else, but let's borrow from that. So we did. And that's the result of what we ended up with. Not one of my favorite games, but I think one thing that was really surprising about this game is how successful it was in Europe. We probably sold 60% of those games into the European market. Didn't do real well here, but Europe loved it. They loved motorcycles, and you know, the Germans at that time. What was the distributor in Germany? Nova. Nova did a whole campaign on this thing and made a poster with all the sales guys on it wearing leather jackets and looking all badass. And I don't have that picture, but I didn't manage to get it on the slide set this time. I do have the picture, but it's pretty funny. The head guy, who was Hans Rosenzweig, standing out in front wearing leathers and looking all badass. And so that was kind of a funny story behind that game. So that's Road Kings. Any questions so far? Anybody have anything? Okay. Next slide, please. Big guns. This was the first game I teamed up with Python on. That back glass. Everybody asks me, why did you make the back glass so much taller? I didn't make it taller. Python refused to change the artwork. True story. We fought about it, and I said, what about the European market? Those games are never going to fit in any of their little clubs and low ceiling, you know, what have you. Well, I lost the argument. I mean, at some point, everybody did. The management was arguing with them, and it just, at some point, everybody gave up, and so we built the game. But this was also, game came out of the Catapult, the design of the Catapult, which I used on subsequent games, Taxi and Fishtails. This game was built around that feature. I had that first, and we started, I'm thinking, you know, let's have a castle, let's attack the castle and bombard it. This is way before Medieval Madness, by the way, way before. And so we developed this. We put my brother in as the evil bad guy, King Tyrant, and I forget, Trudy, did you do speech on that game?
No, I did not.
But we had a princess in there, and the king was holding the princess in the castle, and your job, of course, was to attack the castle and rescue the queen. So, okay, I think I've covered that one. Next, please. That piece of shit. Wish I never made it. No, I'm kidding. No, this game did really well. This was my, I think, first big success in terms of sales numbers. I don't recall exactly what the number was, but for me at the time it was It was a good playing game. I thought it was really well executed. The artwork, everything came together very nicely. Crazy characters, just crazy fun, you know, and I really enjoyed working on that game. That kind of brought me back to, you know, gave me a little grounding.
I heard that the production number it got taken off the production line because the next game was ready to go. And the figure I've got in my head is just short of 10,000 units.
I think that's high. I think that's high, but nobody seems to know what the number is. My recollection is 8,000.
Okay.
But that could be off. Been a while. Sorry.
So what year was that one?
1988.
Is that the first one with the crisscrossing ramp?
Yes. First time I did that.
Can I ask you a question about the spin-out ramp? I have a friend
Sure.
in California who's written to me. He's doing his taxi over, and he says that the prototype had the red spin-out ramp, and I guess the ones that came out after were blue. Is there a reason you went from red to blue?
I don't recall exactly. The reason I think initially we wanted it to be blue, and I don't remember the reason we couldn't get the material. We didn't order it in time. You had to order that stuff way in advance to make sure that you could get your molds done, and you had, you know, ample time to run prototypes and things like that. And I think we just ran out of time, and the red was readily available, and so we jumped on the red. I have never seen a blue one myself.
He says somebody's going to come out with it.
Yeah, there's someone in the hall, I think, selling them in blue.
Blue
and
makes
red.
sense because I think all the posts were blue on the playfield.
Twisted Pins is going to make both colors.
Okay.
You
Cool.
heard it here first.
Awesome. Thank you.
How long did you get away with Maryland?
200 games
Wow.
before the cops caught us.
But most of those must have ended up in Europe.
Well, it was the sample run, I believe, when we discovered it. No one really checked, and I think it was Roger Sharp who came and said, "You can't put Maryland." We got a phone. Actually, we got a phone call. Now I remember. We got a phone call from the Roger Richmond agency who owned the rights to Marilyn Monroe, James Dean, all of those characters and actors from that period. And we got a call from them saying, "Cease and desist immediately, or you will pay." So we stopped.
How long did that slow up production?
Not long. I think we made an arrangement with them to have a certain amount that we could continue on so that we could make the transition. There was some arrangement made. I wasn't involved in it directly, but I remember Roger getting on the phone and saying, "Hey, look, we're going to be, you know, we're not going to be able to make any games if we don't have some leeway in how long we can do this. We promise we'll stop, but we need to run new art, change the colors, change the play fields." You know, obviously there was a lot of work to do to get that flipped around. But it happened really quickly, as I recall. I think it was probably a 6-week turnaround. Yeah. So we were able to keep going. I don't remember any lull or stopping that game because of that.
And was there any significance behind selecting the redhead named Lola for that in place of the Maryland one?
Yeah, that's my fault. The reason the Lola name appeared was because Python had said that such a beautiful job on making that woman look like a man. You all know the song. I mean, that's exactly where that came from. I go, we're going to call her Lola. So that's the story behind that. Anything else?
Was the ramps, you know, if that was the first one with the crisscrossing ramps, was there a particular inspiration for that, or was that a bit circumstantial?
No, originally I had that on the game. It was one of the first features I had on the game when I was drawing it up because I loved it. I thought this is going to be cool. And the original theme for this game was not Taxi. It was actually going to be Grand Prix 2. So I guess I should have mentioned that, huh? Pretty big piece. Oops.
From a flow perspective or speed, it makes a lot of your games very fun.
Thank you. I kind of realized that too. What I liked about doing that specifically was it set the next shot up, so the ball always came back to the opposite return lane. Excuse me. And so you were always setting up the player for the next possible shot. And it made things really accessible, I thought, you know, with a little bit of risk in that in Taxi, if you didn't make that shot, you were looking at a dead rollback right through the flippers if you weren't careful. The game was pretty bad about that. But I think the risk reward in that game was that you could wire those shots pretty well and get to a point where you could pretty well avoid that if you were an average player. So we kind of left that in. I wasn't going to stick a post between the flippers or anything like that because I kind of liked a little bit of danger element in that, you know. So we kind of left that as is. Anything else? Okay, we can go to the next one. Okay, this was largely, the playfield design was largely done by Barry Osler. I was sort of in there with the rules and a couple of shots. I didn't really do the drawing on this game. This was Barry Osler, but I was involved in a lot of the speech and just a lot of the other aspects of the game and getting it done. We kind of all jumped on it because there was a time crunch. This game originally was slated to be Batman, based on the TV show. That was the license I wanted to go after at the time, not knowing this is, what, 1989?
Yep.
This is when Data East had secured the license. We didn't know it. And Batman, I think, was one of their first licensed themes, if I'm not mistaken. At least, no, not the first. They had a couple before that. That's wrong. In any case, we had the utility belt on the bottom. The police car was the Batmobile, and that top section was going to be the Bat Cave. So that's kind of, we had the design all ready to go, and we kind of just thought, well, we can't have Batman, but now we're too late, we're in the grind. So police force, kind of a seat of the pants theme, I think, at the time, but that's the story behind that one. Not much else to tell. Any questions on that?
Yeah. Who specifically came up with the concept of animals are police and criminals?
Who do you think?
I have wondered that many times.
That was definitely Python. Yeah. Okay, we can go to the next one. There's Diner. This thing, man, this was kind of a crazy thing to be doing, I guess, at the time. I was always into toy collecting, and I have a lot of antique toys, and I was into nostalgia, you know, and I thought, man, how come there's not more pinball machines in diners? Because it's a total fit, you know, and I just thought, I'm going to make a machine about a diner. Why not? So we came up with the Goofy character thing again and kind of dropped that in. Kind of based on Taxi. Obviously, we'd had some success with that. So we had, this time, I think, who did we have? We had Gorby again. And
Margaret Thatcher.
Margaret Thatcher, which was played by none other than my wife, Trudy. She did all the voice for that. What else about that game? I don't know. If you guys have questions, fire away. I mean,
What about the cup on Diner? Where did that come from?
that came, good question. That came from a Leave It to Beaver episode that I had seen. That's right, where he climbs up on the sign, falls into the cup. Right.
You actually skipped past a game you were involved in. There was something between Police Force and Diner that you worked on. Elvira?
Oh yeah, Elvira. I have to talk about Elvira. We don't have a picture, but that's okay. There's a, if you guys look at Elvira and the Party Monsters, there's a little snippet on the bottom where the Ritchie name is there. Well, Steve and I didn't design that game, but we ended up having to help Dennis out with it because Dennis was laid up in the hospital from a motorcycle accident. We were out dirt riding. I was with him. This is a great story. We're coming around this blind turn. I'm on the inside, Dennis is out here, and we're hauling ass. And as we come around this corner, here's a giant slag pile, probably 60 feet high, with an abrupt incline of, I don't know, 80 degrees or something. And he head on right into it and went flying up in the air. Came down on the ground, the bike landed on his leg and crushed his femur bone. So we're in the middle of nowhere, on private property, no less. And he's down, and I stop, and I'm like, what are we gonna do? What can I do for you? Can I do something for you? He goes, get my helmet off, get it off right now, blah, blah, blah. He was having trouble breathing, so like an idiot, I pulled his helmet off of him, which you are never supposed to do if somebody's down or hurt. Never, last thing. But he was having trouble breathing, so I reacted and I eased it off of him. And I don't know, about 20 minutes later, an ambulance came. We had the police there. I got a ticket for trespassing. Dennis got, how long? In the hospital.
About 3 months.
3 months in the hospital from that injury. So somebody had to finish his game. Steve and I jumped in, a bunch of people did, and that's why you see the Ritchie name on the Elvira and the Party Monsters game. I don't recall exactly what we did, but I did a bunch of speech on that game. Steve, you did some stuff to finish the playfield. Yeah.
He wasn't finished with it.
Right. And so that's why that's there. So.
Great game. I just want to say that I never liked Dennis Nordman. Just kidding.
He's a great guy. He's actually one of my favorite people in the business. He's a great guy. If you guys haven't met him, you need to.
He's just a big teddy bear.
Pretty much. When he talks like this a lot, you know.
I mean,
he's a good guy.
That was not the only stunt that Dennis got involved in. I was thinking of his finger.
Oh, no, that's Steve.
No, there's a Dennis. I'm not sure quite how. He stuck his finger somewhere he shouldn't and hurt it. I won't say any more.
Is it a light socket?
No. This is your show.
What? Oh, yeah. He would say this whenever there was an issue. Oh, yeah, he said this when we were out there. Barb's going to kill me. That's his wife, who's also a great person.
Well, while we're talking about wives, what's this thing with pinball designers and secretaries?
Yeah, it's magic.
I mean, how many of you are there? That?
Well, there's 3 of us, I think.
Right, I think.
No, 4.
Is there 4?
Right.
Debbie and Pat.
Right.
Greg
and Andy. Greg Ferris and his wife Andy. We all met our wives where we work. So it says a lot about our level of dedication, don't you think?
And Dennis and Mark.
And also Dennis Nordman met his wife at Bally. So.
Okay.
Interesting little tidbits of information that no one can do anything with.
Whatever. It's part of the backdrop against the environment in which you were working.
It was really fun.
Well, you did say earlier that you were working with having a good time at work, and it's just exploring what that means.
Right. Sure.
Carry on.
Okay, we can go to the next slide, please. There's another baseball game. How'd that happen? Okay, this game was the first Williams game to use the DMD. I don't remember the reasons around it. What was it Terminator that used the dot matrix?
Yeah,
I know, big mistake. I'm trying to talk to the deaf one over here.
I mean, Terminator had dot matrix, and Gilligan's Island came out.
Right. Well, I was up in the batter's box, so to pardon the pun, but the display was ready. Steve's game wasn't quite ready, and it was spring, which is kind of a bad time to release a new game in those days. The best slot was the fall, always the fall. So this was a spring game, and pretty much open to me. I got to put that dot matrix in here, which really made a big difference. We were able to animate, put the heckler in, and just have some more fun with, a traditional pitch and bat game. We had
spit out cards.
Yeah, it had a card dispenser, and which I have a patent on, so I'm kind of proud of that. Fun game, artwork, Pat McMahon, who's going to talk to you later. We had a great time making this game, as I recall. But again, we built, I believe the production number was 3,500 on that thing, and it was over 3 years. So we would build them in the spring, 1,200 here, 1,300 there, and then we did that for 3 years. So that was a pretty successful game.
What was the first year? What was the first year?
The year that was made?
Yeah.
I believe 1990?
I've got it as 91, just.
91, 90 in there? 91. Yeah. Yeah, and there was a card dispenser that would give out, you know, whatever the operator wanted to put in there. At that time, baseball cards were pretty hot, and there were a couple different price levels. So you could put super expensive cards in there if you wanted to, and attract kids, and you know. So it was kind of a little bit of a different deal as far as pitch and bat games go. But you know, something a little different, a little expansion of one's, I guess, understanding of, you know, different than a pinball. It was interesting for me to work on. I enjoyed it. That's all I got. Next one, please. There's Fishtails. Wish I had a better picture, but you guys know what that looks like. This again was artwork, superb artwork by Pat McMahon. Highest selling game I ever made while at Williams. 13,000 units, I believe. It's a good number. I really enjoyed the video modes on this game, the torpedo, the boat. There's a story behind that. Really quickly, that came from my dad and I used to go fishing a lot on the lakes in California growing up as a kid and stuff, and we'd go out early and there'd be water skiers out on the lake. Yeah, messing up the fishing, right? It's the last thing you want. So he suggested one day, he said, wouldn't it be great if we could shoot a torpedo at those bastards? That's where that came from. So yeah, that was really fun. That's another game that went really smooth. Pretty much everything was right out of the gate. Had very little redesign, or I think that was 2 whitewoods, but I think the last one was just, we ended up polishing up a couple of shots on the thing, and that was it.
There was a couple of small changes. The top left-hand corner, the tilty thing.
Top left-hand corner.
No, sorry,
Refresh my memory.
Thinking of Indiana Jones.
Would you stop that?
Sorry, I'm
You
jumping.
gotta stay on track.
Right.
He's up here to keep me on track. Look what he does.
So,
What's that?
What about the lightning flip?
Good question.
Were those intentional?
Yes. The mistake we made was that we paid a lot of attention in those days to our French and German distributors who, you know, at that time they were buying the lion's share of what we were making. And so they would come in 2 months before we would release the game to look at it, to have a look at it, to play it, to beat on it, kick the tires, so to speak. And they suggested making a shorter flipper. And I said, why are we going to do that? He said, the ball time is too long. Players in Europe are going to kill this game. You know, if we shorten the flippers, it's going to fix everything. So I guess, I don't know why I didn't argue for domestic games to be built with the longer flippers. I don't recall why I did that, but it turned out to be a really big mistake because players here hated it. Hated those flippers, man. I still hear about it.
I like them now. I mean, I think it is mean and plays harder, but
Yeah, it definitely opens the bottom by 1/4 of an inch, I believe.
yeah. And then a follow-on question with Fishtails in particular, how much interaction was there between you as a game designer with the physical layout of the game and the rules of the game? The rules of the game to me are so superb, right? But where are the handoffs there?
Not much of a handoff. That was pretty much me. Mark Panaccio was the programmer. He and I worked on the rules and tweaked the rules and got them to where, you know, it was probably an equal input on at least the advancing of the captive ball and that sort of thing. That the loop shot on the outside, we had originally placed that on the actual lock shot. So every time you locked the ball, it would advance the captive ball. And we thought, that's going to be too tough. That shot's tough, you know. I mean, let's put it on the outer loop, and that way you can build it continuously. And so that's, I think, that is my favorite feature in that game. I don't know how you feel about that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I like the fact that you alternate between the orbit to light it and then the captive ball in the center to collect it.
Right. But not without risk. Again,
yeah, absolutely.
that center shot was a bastard. It could be.
kamikaze.
Yeah.
What about super jackpots, that makes the game so fun. It's a very challenging multi-ball to begin with, to lock one back up and then.
Yeah, I had done that on a couple. I had done that same sort of scheme on a couple of games. I'd done it, I believe, on Taxi. We did it on let me think now. Diner had something similar. Road Kings, where you had to get multi-ball and then relock the balls, and then do something else to get them out, and then do it again. And yeah, it was repetitious, but I think challenging. Pretty tough to do, you know, repetitively.
Oh yeah, and just the depth of the game with features like you know, Rock the Boat and Fish Frenzy and stuff like that. Very, very good game.
Thank you.
The promotional video is one of my favorite ones of all the Williams ones from the 90s.
Oh, God.
Well, you and Pat at Gage's Lake, right?
What's that?
You and Pat out at Gage's Lake.
Yeah? Yeah. Did you like the mullet?
Yeah.
That was a mean mullet I had in those days.
So where did the theme come from?
What's that?
Where did the theme come from? Are you
the theme. Yeah, that's another story. I recall us doing a friendly fishing trip. Python, myself, Pat, I believe Tony Kramer. We went out on Lake Michigan and we were going to go salmon fishing. So I think we went out and did that, and we had so much fun. We thought, well, the three of us sat there and said, hey, wouldn't it be cool to make a game about fishing? Who's going to play that? Somebody said, and I went, everybody knows what fishing is. I mean, it'd be a great theme. Turns out France bought more games than anybody, which is really weird. I couldn't believe that. But they loved it. They sucked it up. So, yeah, that's where that came from. It was just fun days, you know, where you weren't tied to a license or anything like that. You were doing your own thing, and, you know, I miss those days. I think there's a little bit lost on some of these new licensed games because you're on a drive belt. You have to get done, and it has to be a certain way, and you have to pay homage to certain things. And I've always enjoyed original themes. I think working on them much more than a licensed theme.
Well, isn't that somewhat ironic that your next game after this was in fact a licensed game?
Yeah, it was. But it was a good license.
Okay. Well, tell us what was good about it.
It was Indiana Jones. I mean, who doesn't like Indiana Jones?
Okay.
You know, that was, yeah, I mean, everybody was, at that point, everybody was after the next license at Williams. And, you know, this came up. Roger Sharp brought it out to, we had a meeting, and he said, I got all these titles. I got this, I got that, I got Indiana Jones. I went, I want that. So I ended up getting it, and Doug Watson found out that we were doing this, and was in my office, I think, within 5 minutes after that meeting, going, I got to do the art. I have to do the art. Put your sword away, Doug. You can do the art, no problem. Actually, that didn't happen. But he was all over it. He loved it. He loved the theme, and he was really helpful with the rules. Definitely Doug took a big portion of the, I have to give credit to him because he and Brian Eddy worked out most of how the modes were going to operate. We had the idea to pull from each of the three movies, but how we were going to do that, we had a million different ideas and ways to, I mean, something like that, you could go 6 different directions. So I think Doug was really helpful in kind of roping that in and getting it organized, and pretty much had it in the first shot. So I think he referred to me as being, what was the term he used? Distracted, I think. Well, that's anything but distraction, if you ask me. I mean, I think we kind of laid it down and said, okay, Doug, you got it, go get it. It's a good idea, I like it. And I would do that with my guys. You know, if you guys had if anybody on that team had a better idea than what we were thinking, it was in the game, period. No questions asked. So very much a group effort. I did the play field. All the geometry was pretty much me. The tilt play field came much later. That was a last minute thing that we kind of put in there. I had an upper level that just kind of ran the ball down, but really wasn't that fun. We were looking for something else over there. So we developed the motorized tilt-o-matic play field. I was awarded a patent for that too. Pretty cool. And that's how that evolved, you know. I had a great team of people on that game, probably the best team anybody could ask for. at the time. Like I said, Brian Eddy, Doug Watson, Jack Scanlon on all the mechanicals, who was also a great guy. Awesome to work with. He has left the earth. He passed away about 2 years ago. So what else can I say about that?
Well, tell us about the differences between the one that you have in your basement and the one that...
Oh, I have a prototype. I have one of the first 12 that were made, which has no... there are no names screened on the bottom of the playfield. I don't know if you guys have ever seen other examples of that. I know that they're out there. I know guys that have them. And the names weren't printed, and there were 2 misspellings on the playfield as well. The reference to Sala is misspelled. And what was the other thing? One more. I don't recall, but there were a couple of typos, and then the names weren't there. So, but those were our first 12 sample games, which we would put out on tests locally. I ended up getting one of them. So we had contracts that guaranteed us each game we did, which was great. So at one point I had them all. You know, in the days past, you know, there are times when you need money and things like that, so I ended up selling them off. And today I have 1 Indiana Jones and 1 Fishtails, and that's it.
No diner, huh?
No. Sold my diner, regrettably.
Were you disappointed that the diner numbers were lower?
Yes,
Relatively?
definitely,
Is
yeah.
that because Europe didn't grasp the idea?
Yeah, that was definitely part of the problem. Not real popular in Europe. Here, you know, it was great. It was just one of those that didn't really catch on until later.
Well, while you're talking about your games, and you're saying that you just have the Fishtails and Indiana Jones, but you do have some other pieces that you've worked on.
Oh, I have a Big Buck Hunter. I've been involved with that project since its inception, almost 12 years now, which I'm really proud to say. It's really a good game. With Play Mechanics and Raw Thrills, which I've been a gainful employee for the last 8 years. So good company to work for. That's headed by Eugene Jarvis and, as I mentioned earlier, George Petro. And they keep me real busy, so no complaints. But Buck Hunter has done really well for us.
Mark, is that Harrison Ford on the back glass?
That is not Harrison Ford.
You told me that. I still...
No, Harrison Ford wanted nothing to do with his image on the game. And if he was going to have something to do with it, it was going to cost us an unreasonable amount of money. So we decided we don't need Harrison Ford. Indiana Jones can be, we can get close and not be, you know, not have to worry about it.
That's really close, so there was no problem with that?
No, none. Only because there were prior posters and things done where he had the same attitude. He told them, "No, you're not putting my likeness up there." He's a special person, so you know.
So,
anyway.
So this is where I was talking about the change on the tilting playfield. Your game is slightly different to the production model.
Oh, right. You're talking about the plastics
right,
that we were using.
Yeah.
The injection molded pieces that were put on the edges of that piece, that came much later. The game those were all stainless steel ball guides with playfield plastics superimposed over the top. That was the original design. I actually built some production units that way.
Okay.
A couple hundred, I think. And then they changed to the, after I had left there and gone to Capcom, they had changed to injection molded plastic.
Is there anything about pistol grip for the...
Sorry?
Pistol grip for blocking the ball? Was that a natural idea, or did you...
Oh yeah, that was an original idea that we had slated right from the get-go, from the beginning. And that is actually a pretty good copy of a Webley revolver, which is what he used in the movie, as best we could tell. Which I believe is a British pistol, if I'm not mistaken.
Is, yeah.
Right.
The other thing that about your game is it's got red boards inside it.
Oh yeah.
I don't think they're unique to that game. But what's the story behind the red circuit boards?
Probably had to do a lot with DCS, which was just coming up at that time. That was the first game to sport DCS sound, by the way. And so we had a lot of prototyping, and God, that was nerve-wracking waiting for that to come on board, because it was running concurrent with the rest of the game, which meant, you know, we'd like to have the sounds and stuff working well before that. And in that game, I think 2 weeks before we started building prototypes, we had completed the sound system for it. So that was like really, I was really nervous about that happening. There was a lot of, Chris Granter did a tremendous amount of work on that to make that work. Rich Karstens, who was with us at the time also, those two guys were just buried in that for I think 6 or 8 months. And I'm trying to get the game done and get everything organized, and it's just like, the guy's ever going to be done? When's it going to work?
Mark, question from the back. Are you aware of the frog bonus Easter egg, and if so, could you comment on that?
That went in after I left the company. I'm really not. I found out about that after I left. That was, as far as I knew, that was not in there when I was there. So I think that came after they started production. Because I know there was a software update at some point.
Do you have any story about the Well of Souls?
What's that?
The Well of Souls.
I still didn't hear the question.
Well of Souls mode.
Yes, what about it?
What was it? It's got a lot of balls. Is there any inspiration behind it?
I'm not hearing that.
What's the inspiration behind that mode?
Oh, that was Brian Eddy. We had the plan to have a 6-ball multi-ball in there, but the first plan we had was, I believe, after you master all the jackpots and you get to the ultimate end of the game, so to speak, that was the only point you could get the 6 balls. So Brian said, why don't we make it happen earlier? Let's put it in a mode. And when all the balls are gone, that's it. You get it once, move on. So that's where that came from. So it was to make that happen a little more frequently, because we thought it was a pretty powerful thing in the game at the time. I don't know who was doing 6-ball multi-balls then. You guys probably know better than I do, but that was a big deal, you know?
So you were saying that that was a revision after you left. So you left.
The Easter egg frog thing.
Right. So can you tell us about what happened after you left?
I got in trouble. A lot of people got mad at me when I left Williams to go to Capcom. And I was hired there as its director of engineering because I signed a clause with Williams saying that I could not work for a competitor in the same capacity for a period of 1 year. So I honored that, and I was actually director of engineering, which I was handling everything, and that was a startup operation, as you guys all know, which meant we had nothing, and we basically built it from scratch. The first game, next slide please. First game we made was a redemption game. But what we actually did with this is we were actually piloting the circuit boards, the hardware system for pinball in this game. So this was our first crack at sort of getting the hardware moving along on a kind of a simple basis, gave us a chance to test some things out before we committed totally to pinball.
Can I, I've just got one eye on the clock here. Can we go straight on to your Kingpin game?
Sure. Well, that's magic. So we built these games. Other designers obviously worked on these. I would come in and make suggestions and try to help where I could, but I really didn't do any design work up until Kingpin, and I was kind of done with the whole management thing, and just was not for me. You know, I realized that that's not my place. My place is to be a game designer. And so I wanted badly to get back in, and this was a result of that. And we did a couple of crazy things with this. I don't know if you guys have seen the time play version. You would think that I would have learned that lesson from Thunderball. No, did it again. Anyway, that was a disaster, and so we went back to conventional 3-ball rules, and the game came out pretty good at the end of the day, I thought. If I was going to do something different with this today, I have a lot of things I would have liked to have done differently. The colors definitely are one of the things. The backlash colors are just, I never liked the pastel-y, you know, that doesn't look like a gangster or bad guy.
So what else?
I think we could have made that
What
look
else
much
would
better.
you change in that game?
The cabinet color.
Okay.
I would have gone with something a little bit brighter, a little, you know, black background.
Any thoughts about the playfield?
Several.
Okay. So are you saying that if you were doing that game today, you could improve on it?
Yeah.
Cool. Okay.
I think so.
All right. So what came after that?
After this, well, I took a year off. Actually had a hard time finding employment as a pinball designer for whatever reason. And then started up my own company. Temporarily, I had my own little design sort of studio, and I did this game, which is called Roadkill Grill.
Tasteful.
Quite not. And no one liked it because, yeah, it was not for kids. And even though we tried to keep it clean, there's no blood or guts or animals getting smashed. But the name alone killed us. Okay. Basically, no one was interested at all.
So next.
Crash and burn. It's not a perfect world. What can I say?
So moving on.
What's that? Moving on, yes. We can go on to the next one. Okay, this is Orange County Choppers, which was my first attempt at a video pinball. This was something that IT really wanted to do. Elaine was all over it, and then we talked about it, and I said, yeah, but you know, video pinball doesn't work. No one wants to play that. And I kind of got into it. I didn't really have much else to do at the time, and she was, you know, paying my salary and said, go ahead and do it. It'll be cool. So I worked on this for like a year and a half, and it also went nowhere. So, you know, now it's kind of a, I see them at shows and stuff. I guess some people buy them, and it was kind of fun. We did some pretty cool things with it visually, but let's face it, it's not pinball. There's no way. So that was just kind of something I did when I was at IT. I was really bored at that company. I think Elaine knew that, and I think she was really, she's a great person, first of all. Wonderful person to work for, and she was more than patient with me and my crazy ideas, and I had a really good time working there regardless of, you know, numbers and that. I never really sold any of my games that I had done there, but you know, on to better things. I went to play mechanics after that because I wanted to be, you know, productive again and do something worthwhile. So.
Okay.
And that's.
Well, we've got some time for questions.
We do.
Do we have some questions? Is there a microphone out there? Could you step up to the microphone if you have a question, please?
Hi, Steve. What's the story on Flipper Football? I love the game, but nobody else. It's a rare person that really enjoys it. Do you know what happened, or? I don't know.
Yeah, I do. There was a lot of Python was really pushing for us to do something that was going to appeal in the European market at that time. We were trying everything and anything at that company. The pinball market was starting to crap out, basically, at that time. Flipper Football was Python and Brian Hansen, and they kind of went off, and I had very little to do with that game. I was not all about it. It was so crazy unconventional and just kind of just weird. It didn't have, I couldn't really speak to it. Python, you know, he had an idea for that game, and he was going to make it happen and see it through. But I think he lost touch with a little bit of, you know, the convention of what needs to happen with game flow. The game kind of didn't have much flow. Shoot for the back end. I mean, great visual effects. That was kind of a lone wolf project. You know, they kind of just went off and did that. I was not involved in managing that at that point. It was, I believe, the last product that came out of Capcom. So I don't know. I definitely was not on board with it, as I recall. But there wasn't a whole lot I could do about it. I mean, honestly, Mike Stroll was behind it. Everybody was pushing it. They thought it was going to be great. So I don't have a lot to say about it, I guess.
Okay. Next question. Down the front.
What's true about the rumor that Big Bang Bar was ready to go into production, but Flipper Football was chosen instead, and that it could have been the other way around, and who knows what would have happened?
Politics. That was political. And Python was pushing for his game to get released into Europe quickly for the soccer season at that time. I think there was some major soccer event, I forget what, World Cup maybe. So we were pushing for, he was pushing to get that. That's why that happened.
But it could have been the other way around.
It could have been. I also think that, yeah, there were a lot of the effort that Big Bang had at that point. We've kind of figured that we were at a point where we could go back and kick the game out anytime we wanted to. I think most of it was done. Not everything. I think there was a few nuances that had to go into it. I don't recall exactly what, but I think Flipper Football was actually in a better position because the company resources were placed on it, where we thought Big Bang was at a point where we were testing, I believe, when that decision was made, and they kind of pulled everybody off of it and put everybody onto Flipper Football. So there wasn't a whole lot of effort going into Big Bang at that time.
I guess also if the Flipper Football tied into a major football event, then timing would have been an issue for that game, whereas it wouldn't be an issue for Big Bang Bar, which wasn't
right.
tied into.
An issue of timing, as I recall.
Okay. Any more questions?
Yeah. How many games can you recall how many games you did the vocals on in the audio?
A lot. A lot. I can't recall how many. I'm going to say at least 12.
Was it true that you did some of the recordings in the bathroom at Williams for the echo effect?
For which game?
Any game. Any game.
No, it's not true. I never did anything in a bathroom.
You were somewhere else at the time.
It's scary now.
Yeah. No, we had onboard effects for that kind of thing. We would never have to do anything like that. We had a sophisticated enough sound department that we could pull off pretty much any echo effect you wanted without having to go into, well, a bathroom.
Okay. Well, I think our time is up.
Okay.
So I'd like to thank you for giving us this insight into your wonderful career in pinball. And as it occurs to me, you're the only person I know that's been inducted into the Pinball Hall of Fame in 2 consecutive years.
Oh my God, really?
Yeah. So thank you very much. And
my pleasure.